Good afternoon. Happy Sunday. Hope you all are having a good time, and I'm glad you're here to join me with another casual Sunday magic stream. So, Sundays, normally on Sundays, what we do is we play sort of beginner magic. I have 10 different monocolored tribal aggro style decks that I use to introduce people who are new to Magic, so that I can sort of teach them how to play, and then also people generally just still kind of learning how to play, and especially learning how to play Commander. So these are we're going to play three of those decks today on Wednesdays and Thursdays. One or the other, I will stream sort of normal Commander decks, just whatever decks that I happen to enjoy or want to play at any given time. So this past Wednesday, or what was it, Thursday? This past Thursday, I did. So I played some of my most expensive decks that I own, but for today, we're just going to play some kind of nice, happy little decks here. And today specifically, we're going to play we'll play a mono blue deck that is tribal Sphinxes. Then we will play a mono green deck that's tribal Elves, and a mono white deck which is tribal Soldiers. So, kind of getting started. We take these slow these days, pretty slow. I kind of go through the process of explaining all of my thought processes for playing these decks to kind of show you, or kind of help you, give you an idea about the different things that you can think about while you're playing, and also maybe give you a taste on what kind of Magic you really want to play. I'm kind of a casual player. I don't go too extreme with competitiveness. I used to, but I don't so much anymore. So we'll just, like I said, kind of take it easy. So the commander that we're playing for Sphinxes is called Unesh Cryosphinx Sovereign, which is a 6-cost 4/4 flying Sphinx with Sphinx spells you cast cost two less to cast. Ugh, what's words? Sorry. So he's a Sphinx that makes other Sphinxes cheaper to cast, which is really great. And that's kind of why we put him as the commander for this deck. And then it has, whenever it or another Sphinx enters the battlefield under your control, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles, and then you put 1 pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So essentially, every time you put a Sphinx into play, you get some cards for free, which is really great, especially in blue. One of blue's strengths is going to be to draw a bunch of cards. And the idea there is that the more cards you have in your hand, especially the more cards you draw versus the number of cards your opponents draw, the more options that you're going to have, and the better ability you will have for taking over the game, taking control of the game, and then ultimately winning. A lot of the Sphinx cards that we're going to see, well, a lot of the cards in this deck are going to help support Sphinxes, but they're also going to there's going to be a lot of these kind of copy creature effects. So Sphinxes are often pretty expensive. So, I mean, Cryosphinx is 6 cost. This Sphinx of Magosi is 6 cost as well. So by playing, basically what we'll do is we'll play a Sphinx, and then we'll try to keep making copies of the same Sphinx, because the copy spells will be cheaper than the actual Sphinxes, and it'll still count for Unesh's ability. So that's our goal, is to basically make copies of Sphinxes. And if we're running shy on Sphinxes, then we may end up trying to copy somebody else's stuff. So let's go and get started with an opening hand, what an opening hand might look like. This is a pretty good one, because essentially we have we're kind of separated here. We're a little bit low on land, but that's okay, because we're making up for it with these 3 cards. We have a ramp spell, a spell that will... Ramp just means that it's a card that gets us more mana. So on our second turn, we'll be able to play this spell to get more mana. And then we'll have the choice of one of these two cards. So Warden of Eos Isle is a flying creature that makes other flying creatures cost less, which is really great if we decide we're on a path to try to get Unesh out and other flyers as well. And then we also have Pilgrim's Eye, which is a flyer that goes and finds us another land in case we're not finding any land. So then after that, so basically we'll play these cards first, and they will happen pretty quickly near the beginning of the game. And then we have a card draw effect to try to help us get back some of the cards that we use to ramp. And then this Sphinx is a really cool Sphinx. It's a 6 cost 6/6 flyer, so it's actually pretty beefy. We need just 3 blue mana though, so we may have to try to find our way into another blue mana, but hopefully this Pilgrim's Eye will get us that blue mana that we want. But then it has an effect that allows us to pay mana to draw cards and make itself stronger. So the kind of happy thing about that is that after we kind of use all of the cards in our hand, and especially another draw spell, we'll still have this Sphinx to kind of start getting us more and more cards. So we don't ever run out, hopefully don't ever run out of cards in our hand. So let's go and draw our first card for the turn. So untap, upkeep, draw is how the turn starts. So our draw effect is a really big Sphinx, so that's going to be something we're going to hold on to for a while. And once we get around to playing this, it has a really cool effect, but for now we're not going to worry about it too much. We're just going to play this island and then pass the turn. So our next deck is the mono green Elves, which the Sphinxes I call a big tribe. They have big creatures that take longer to get out. Elves is a small tribe. They have a lot of small creatures, and we're trying to basically flood the field with as many of them as we can in a short amount of time. And hopefully that will be enough to help us win. So, especially with Elves has a long history of swarming the field and taking over. So this is actually one of the decks that's taken a long time to tune against the other beginner decks so that it's not as good or as potent or more potent than the other ones are. So to that end, let's go ahead and talk about the hand. Well, I guess first we can talk about the commander. So the reason that we're going to flood the field is because our commander, Zuri, Renegade Leader, is a 3-cost 2/2 elf with a legendary elf warrior, actually. And it has pay a green to regenerate another target elf. And regenerate just means that if something would die, we're basically making it not die. It regenerates itself before it fully dies. So we can do that as many times as we have green mana for, which will be useful if somebody tries to, say this white deck, which is our final deck, if it has a card that tries to destroy all the creatures, we can use Azuri to try to stop all of our creatures from dying. And then it has a second effect, which costs 2 colorless and 3 green, and it has elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. So basically we're going to try to get a bunch of creatures out so that we can get a lot of mana, and then once we have a lot of mana, we will use Azuri, Renegade Leader's ability multiple times in a single turn, and hopefully attack one player and take them out of the game. Especially because the trample effect, what that basically means is that if the creature that we have attacking deals more damage than the defending creature has toughness or life, essentially, the excess damage goes directly to the player instead of normally. If there's no trample, then the creature just absorbs all of however much damage it is. So even if you had like a 100, like a 100 power creature, if it didn't have trample, then a 1/1 creature can still block it, and the player that you're trying to attack would take no damage. So let's go ahead and take a look at this hand. We're starting with a little heavy on land, unfortunately, but I'm kind of hoping that by having a little bit too many, like ideally probably 2 land would have been better, so that we could have 2 more cards, like have these 2 land and then these 2 cards be more elves.
mainly because pretty much everything in this deck costs very little mana, so we don't need many lands to get out the creatures that we have in the deck that also produce mana. So having too many land can be a detriment to us. So, and conveniently, we do have a elf in our hand that taps for mana, so that's probably going to be one of the first things that we'll play. The next thing that we'll play is probably Quest for Renewal, which has whenever a creature you control becomes tapped, put a quest counter on it. It's a 2-cost enchantment. So whenever you tap a creature, it gets a quest counter, and then as long as there are 4 more, we get to untap our creatures every other player's turn. So that's going to be really cool. Once we can use that mana to do different things, we'll be able to tap our creatures multiple times and get to have different effects each time. Or it'll also help us with Azuri's ability so that we can do stuff on our turn and then hold up mana on, or have mana available on our opponent's turns to regenerate elves and stop people from hurting us, because we'll just block with our creatures and ours won't die. So let's see what card we draw for the turn. So untap, upkeep, draw a card, and it is Ivy Lane Denizen, which is really good. It's a 4-cost 2/3 elf that has, whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So that's going to go really well with our Gyre Sage, and we'll see that here in a few turns once we get the Ivy Lane Denizen out, because Ivy Lane Denizen is a little bit more mana than what we'll have, but we should be able to get it out pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and play a green mana. We don't have anything else to do with our hand. We don't have a 1-cost elf. So we will just have to wait until next turn to play our first card. Moving on, our last deck for today is Mono White Tribal Soldiers. And it is helmed by Odric Lunarch Marshal, which is a 4-cost 3/3 human soldier. It has, at the beginning of each combat, creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn if a creature you control has first strike. The same is true for flying, death touch, double strike, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, skulk, trample, and vigilance. Oh, what a mouthful. Actually, maybe we can... I wonder if we can put it up on screen so that we can see real quick. There you go, now we can see it. So basically what this guy does is, as long as we have him out, if one of our creatures has an ability, essentially all of our creatures will have that same ability, which is really, really good that we can basically make everything that we have share what everybody else has. And especially really good since we have so many cards in our deck with abilities. So, for example, we actually have a creature with Preeminent Captain, which is a 3-cost 2/2 Kithkin soldier. So kind of like a hobbit, basically. That's what Kithkin are. So it has first strike. So once we get the 2 of these out, then every combat, all of our creatures will have first strike that way. It's so, like the other one here, we have this card, this Planeswalker, but basically during our turn, this Planeswalker acts like a creature that has indestructible. So as long as we have this guy out, all of our creatures will gain indestructible on our turn. So it's actually, it can be a really cool ability with the right cards. So that's what we're going to try to work around. Now let's take a good look at this hand and see how good the hand is. So unfortunately, this hand is a little shy of where I want it to be. Namely because Mono White has a lot of troubles getting mana. And one of the few ways that you're able to get its mana up is with artifacts, but unfortunately artifacts are really, really susceptible to being destroyed. So we really don't want to rely too heavily on it, which means that we don't run quite as many artifacts as we'd really like to, for fear of them getting destroyed. So we're kind of stuck in this like weird space where we may or may not end up getting enough mana to cast the things that we have. and we're just going to have to hope that we draw into something. So, speaking about that hand specifically, we actually don't have anything that costs less than 3. The Finale of Glory, which is technically an X and 2 white, we're probably not going to use that until way later. That card's kind of a very end game where we needed to deal the final blow, so to speak. But we have 3 cards here that cost 3 mana. So really we're going to hope that we, in the next couple of turns, we're able to draw the last mana that we need. There is a okay chance that in the next few turns we will draw another land. So hopefully, really we ideally want to see 4 land. That gets us being able to play. It's still 1 card a turn, but it would get us being able to play virtually all the cards in our deck. With some few exceptions, we actually have 2 of those exceptions in our hand, but they're, again, kind of meant to be like finisher spells. They're our finishing move to finally win. So let's go ahead and draw our first card and kind of cross our fingers and hope that we're not like shut out of the game and it's just going to be Sphinxes versus Elves. Okay, so untap, upkeep, draw. Move that out of the way. And it is not a land, unfortunately. So that's okay. We have 2 more draws before we're going to be in trouble. And this one is actually another good one to have in our hand anyway. So basically, Council's Judgment is a sorcery, a 3-cost sorcery. It has Will of the Council. Starting with you, each player votes for a non-land permanent you don't control. Exile each permanent with the most votes or tied for the most votes. So while it's not a guaranteed removal for the thing that we absolutely want to see removed, there's still a good chance that when we play this, we'll get rid of something that's really good off the table. And it'll be up to our opponents to kind of help us figure out which one of those is going to be. So we'll go ahead and play a land during our main phase, and we will pass the turn back over to Sphinxes so that they can go ahead and play a ramp spell that we wish that we had. So you get to see all of the additional stuff that I have on the side here to kind of help keep track of stuff. Okay. Let's see. Okay, going over to here to Sphinxes, we will untap, upkeep, draw. And our draw is Mirror Image. And so I was talking about cards that become copies of other things. Mirror Image is one of such cards. It is 2 colorless and 1 blue, so a 3-cost card. It is technically a 0/0, but you may have Mirror Image enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature you control. So this is really good for later. For now, we're going to go ahead and during our main phase, we will play another island, tap 2 mana to be able to cast Mind Stone, which is a 2-cost artifact with tap, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or pay a mana, tap it, and sacrifice it to draw a card. So that's all that we can do for this turn. We're just going to go ahead and mosey on back over to the Elves, who are also going to play their own ramp spell. So here with the Elves, we are untap, upkeep, and draw a card. It is a 1-cost elf spell, so that's really good. We will go ahead and, during our main phase, play a forest for the turn. And unfortunately, since we didn't have this elf last turn, I think that we may just go ahead and cast it now. And the reason that we're doing that is because Gyre Sage has an ability, so it's a 2-cost 1/2 elf. So when I say 1/2, all that means is that it has 1 power and 2 toughness. So power is the amount of damage you can deal in a single turn, and toughness is kind of like stamina. So it's how much damage this creature can take in a single turn. So as opposed to some other things where a creature or whatever your unit is Some other games will have life, where if it has like 4 life and it takes 2 damage, then it will have 2 life left in forever until it dies or it gets healed. Well, in Magic, toughness is how much damage it can take every single turn. So it's a little bit different, can be a little tricky, but okay. So to continue on, it's a 2-cost 1/2 elf with evolve. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and then add 1 green to your mana pool for each +1/+1 counter on Gyre Sage. So, basically, every time something comes out that something comes out on our side that has a greater power or toughness than this creature does, then it gets a little bit stronger. But as the stronger it gets, the more mana it ends up tapping for. So that's going to be really useful later on when we're trying to do something like, let's get to it. We don't have to explain it all right now. We're just going to go ahead and move over to the soldier deck, and we're going to cross our fingers that we draw a land spell, or a land card this turn, not the land spell. Untap, upkeep, draw a card, and that's the land that we're looking for. Oh boy, we're gonna be in great shape here soon. Okay, so we will go ahead and play that land. We actually, like I said, all of our stuff is 3 cost, so we can't do anything now, but we will be able to here soon. So we will go ahead and pass back over to the Sphinxes without playing anything. And the Sphinxes will... I'm going to go and move this off. I'm hearing some squeaking, and I may have to oil something later, but I'm going to take a little bit of weight off of the table so that it can hopefully not squeak quite as much, and hopefully the mic isn't picking that up. Okay, so we are back to Sphinxes. So we untap, upkeep, draw a card, and it is Repulse. So blue has a kind of weird... So each of the different colors in Magic are great at different things. Green color is great at generating mana and making creatures really big. The thing that blue is really good for is drawing cards, but also control. Blue doesn't have a lot of destroy something effects. Well, they've been getting a little bit more in later years, but originally they weren't supposed to be able to destroy much of anything at all. They could only delay. And so Repulse is a kind of an old spell that does that. Repulse is a 3-cost instant, 2 colorless, 1 blue, that has return target creature to its owner's hand, and then draw a card. So if somebody played something really big, we could return that creature back to their hand and force them to waste another turn playing it, which doesn't seem like a lot, but sometimes delaying is enough to win the game. So we didn't draw any lands this turn. So during our main phase, I think that what we want to do, I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to pay 3 mana, so these 2 islands and that Mind Stone, to be able to cast Pilgrim's Eye. It's a 3-cost 1/1 flying creature with, when it enters the battlefield, we search our library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into our hand, then shuffle our library. So there's our island, and because now we have a land in our hand, we can continue our main phase by going ahead and playing that land. So we will play the island, and then we will pass the turn after we finish shuffling. So this way we don't get behind on land, and hopefully we can draw into a land one of these other turns. But for now, we just have a small blocker and 4 mana with the Warden of Eos Isle that we could probably play, that we may end up playing next turn. This Warden will allow us to get basically 5 mana for flying creatures. So that's not too bad. If we absolutely have to, we can also make a copy of Warden of Eos with our mirror image. so that we have essentially 6 mana available, and that will allow us to cast our commander. So, passing the turn back to Elves. Elves are going to untap, upkeep, draw a card. We have Essence Warden, which is a 1-cost 1/1 elf with whenever another creature comes into play, we gain a life. So since we'll be playing a lot of creatures, that means we will be able to gain a lot of life, hopefully. Especially if other people end up getting creatures out, we will get life for that as well. For now, we will play our land for the turn, and then let me think. I am thinking that, let's see, we may end up holding off for the turn. I'm now kind of wondering if maybe we should have played Arbor Elf the last turn so that we could have gotten Ivy Lane Denizen out this turn. But maybe for now we go ahead and we tap 2 mana and play Quest for Renewal so that on a later turn we will be able to really make use of the Quest for Renewal, because we have the mana that we need next turn to cast Ivy Lane Denizen, and then we can do some other shenanigans. So until then, we will pass the turn. We're not going to attack, so okay, the thing here to explain, we could attack, especially because you can kind of see the soldier deck over here does not have any creatures, so they couldn't block if they wanted to. But the thing is that sometimes like with table politics, like Magic table politics in a game, you may not want to attack somebody too soon, especially when it's for such a small amount of damage, like 1 damage. If we were playing a deck where we were kind of, in a sense, nickel and diming people on damage, which there are decks that do that. A lot of times they're called pinger decks, or when you ping somebody, you're dealing them 1 damage. If we were playing a deck like that, then it might be useful, but we don't really need to, because our Azuri Renegade Leader will help us get to all the damage we need to take somebody out. So it doesn't make much sense to make somebody upset this early in the game, because they may end up using their removal on us first. They may end up attacking us first before anybody else. So we kind of hold back a little bit until we have a really good reason to be able to attack somebody. So we will go to soldiers. We didn't have anything to untap, so we go to our draw step, untap, upkeep, draw. We drew Austere Command. So it's a 6-cost sorcery with choose 2. Destroy all artifacts, or destroy all enchantments, or destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less, or destroy all creatures with converted mana cost 4 or greater. So that will be one for later, to try to shut somebody down from being able to destroy us. We'll basically use it to clear the board so that we can win easier, or we'll do it as a emergency button to stop somebody else from winning. So until then, we will play another land for our turn, or play a land for our turn. We will pay 3 mana, and we will play Preeminent Captain, which is that Kithkin soldier I talked about earlier. I'm playing this one because its secondary effect is whenever Preeminent Captain attacks, you may put a soldier creature from your hand into play, tapped and attacking. So it'll be a really good one. We can start putting things from our hand into play for free. So basically next turn, if we don't draw another... Oh, let me think. If we don't draw another mana, we'll probably play Gideon Blackblade, and then we will attack with Preeminent Captain, and that will allow us to put our Field Marshal into play for free. So, yeah, I think that's what we'll do. I think that looks good. I think that plan is pretty solid for what we know. We can always instead play Council's Judgment to try to get rid of something. If somebody else has already gotten a really big creature out, then maybe we can try to vote it out so that they don't have it. But for now, we'll just have a 2/2 creature. And see, like, that kind of goes back to what I'm talking about. If the elf deck had attacked the soldier deck then the soldier deck would almost certainly attack with Preeminent Captain next turn, attack the elf deck. So going back to Sphinxes, we will untap, draw a card, and it is Sky Diamond. So it's another ramp spell. It's 2 cost, it comes into play tapped, and it adds a blue mana to our mana pool. So, I think what we do is, since everybody is still kind of not doing anything, that's buying us more time. So as a blue deck, as a mono blue deck here, especially one that plays a bunch of big creatures, we're never in any hurry. We will, if the game goes on long enough, we will win the game. That's just the long and short of it. We will win the game if we go on long enough. So as long as the smaller decks, the small tribes, are not attacking and not doing anything, it's actually better for us. That's better for the Sphinx deck. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to do this, which gets our Sky Diamond. So like I said, we didn't draw a land, so that's actually what we're going to do with the rest of our mana. We are going to pay 2 and we will play Memory Lapse. So we get, oh wait, no, that's a counterspell. I was thinking something else. Never mind. Okay, so we'll just leave that open. Oh, I need to pay actual attention to my cards. We'll just play the Sky Diamond, and then next turn we'll have mana open for this Memory Lapse. It's a counterspell, is what it is. one of those the type of removal that we have in blue is stuff that doesn't kill things that are already out. It stops things from coming in. So let us go to the elf deck, and again, we're not going to attack. We're just going to leave this Pilgrim's Eye as a blocker. So over at the elf deck, we're untapping. We draw a card, Leyline of Abundance. It is a 4-cost enchantment that has, if it's in your hand at the very, very beginning of the game, before anything happens, you can actually start the game with it on the battlefield. It has, whenever you tap a creature for mana, you add an additional green mana. And then it has pay 8 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So that's going to be really, really cool. We will play a... we'll play another land. We will add 4 mana to our mana pool. We will cast the Ivy Lane Denizen. So it's a 4-cost 2/3 creature, which means that it has more power and toughness than Gyre Sage. So Gyre Sage will get a +1/+1 counter. And Ivy Lane Denizen has, whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So that's that kind of cool thing I was talking about. So what we're going to do is we will tap the Gyre Sage for a single green mana, because that's how many counters it has on it. We will cast Arbor Elf, which is a 1-cost 1/1 elf with untap target forest. And because a green creature came into play, we were going to put another +1/+1 counter on Gyre Sage. Oh, and because we tapped a creature for mana, or because we tapped a creature at all, Quest for Renewal gets a quest counter on it. So now, because this creature came to play, and Ivy Lane Denizen triggered, putting a +1/+1 counter on Gyre Sage, now Gyre Sage actually taps for 2 mana whenever we tap him next. So we accelerate fairly quickly with this. We do not have anything else to do. Our Gyre Sage is tapped, and Arbor Elf and Ivy Lane Denizen have Summoning Sickness, so they can't attack this turn. So we will just pass to our Soldier deck, and the Soldier deck probably sees blood in the water this turn. The Elf deck has some icky stuff there, icky stuff that we can't really do much about. So that being said, we need to look at our hand first So we will draw a card, and we have Cathar's Crusade. Man, I'm really hoping that we get mana here soon. We are drawing way too many non-land cards. Because this guy is, we could have, if we had land, if we had 5 land, we should be, I guess we were 1 turn away, but still, we should be close to casting this spell, and we're really not. So, let's see. I think that, yes. So, I think what we're going to do is we're going to pay 3 mana. We will... I think we want to try to do something about Gyre Sage. I want to play Gideon Blackblade, but I'm kind of afraid of Gyre Sage getting too big too quickly. So I am going to go ahead and cast Council's Judgment. So, Council's Judgment is a sorcery with, we each vote on something to get rid of that isn't something of mine. We have to choose something that somebody else has. So, and it's starting with me. So I am going to choose Ivy Lane Denizen. Now, the Sphinx deck can go, and the Sphinx deck is kind of looking at this. Their trouble is that since I've already, I said a Gyre Sage, that's what I want to choose. I'm going to choose Gyre Sage. So they know that I've already chosen Gyre Sage. How this vote works is that whoever has the most votes or is tied for the most votes loses something. So the Sphinx deck, being next in turn order, doesn't want something of theirs to get gotten rid of. So let's say they chose Ivy Lane Denizen instead. So then there'd be 1 vote for Gyre Sage, 1 vote for Ivy Lane Denizen. The Elf deck gets a vote as well. The Elf deck is obviously not going to pick something of its own, especially at that point. It's going to pick something of the Sphinxes deck. So, what could they get rid of? They could get rid of one of the Sphinxes' mana spells, one of the artifacts that it's using right now to ramp for mana, which the Sphinx deck really wants. So, the Sphinx deck is most likely going to choose Gyre Sage as well, because then that essentially locks in what gets removed. And even though Council's Judgment won't remove more than one thing, it's better to do that instead of potentially losing early turn gains. So, Gyre Sage is going to get exiled and will never come back. It is gone forever, unfortunately. Unfortunately for the Elf deck. So, going to our combat phase, we will declare attacks with Preeminent Captain. So we are going to, knowing what we have in our hand, we are going to choose the Elf deck to attack with Preeminent Captain. And that's because once he gets declared as an attacker, we get to put a soldier from our hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So we are going to put Field Marshal onto the battlefield, and it is going to be attacking the Sphinx deck. So now the Preeminent Captain is going to get the Field Marshal. Sorry, let's start over. The Field Marshal is a 3-cost 2/2 human soldier with other soldiers get +1/+1 and have first strike. So our Preeminent Captain is now 1 power stronger, which means that Ivy Lane Denizen can't block it and survive. It would die. So the Elf deck, seeing this, will probably just decide not to block. The Elf deck will go ahead and take the 3 damage from Preeminent Captain and be down to 37 life. The Sphinx deck, on the other hand, it doesn't really mind if the Pilgrim's Eye ends up getting killed. But that being said, the 2 damage from Field Marshal isn't that much. So I think we'll go ahead and just take the 2 damage, and the Sphinx deck will be down to 38 life. And that's because, so most Commander rules have players starting at 20 life. Commander is a little bit different. Commander starts with, by the way, we're done with the soldiers. We have everything tapped out. We can't do anything else. So Commander is a format that starts with 40 life instead. And that's to kind of give some more time for different strategies to sort of arise out of the cards that are playable, which Commander has the widest range of cards available to be able to play, because most formats have some kind of expansive banned and restricted list. And Commander essentially doesn't. Commander, you can play pretty much every card that's ever been printed in Commander. So during our Sphinx's turn, we will untap our mana. We will draw a card. It is Into the Void. So return up to 2 target creature cards to their owner's hands. So that's going to be good. Like I said, we can slow people down a lot with this card. For now, though, let's see. We have 5 mana here. It would have been nice to get that last bit of mana. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. We will pay 3 mana and play our Warden of Eos Isle, which will essentially give us the last mana that we need for flying creatures. And then we will still have Memory Lapse available to counter a spell if we need to. Or, well, this particular one, it puts it back on top of their player's library, so they not only have to replay it, but it also prevents them from drawing a new card the next turn as well. And we're going to pass without doing anything else. Again, it's sort of that 1 damage thing isn't really enough to do much. So we untap for the turn. We have no upkeep, or we have nothing on upkeep, so we draw a card for the turn. It is a forest, not a great card to see, but that's okay. So we will play that forest. We will pay 4 mana, and while we can, we will go ahead and play the Leyline of Abundance. We don't have any creatures that tap for mana, but that's going to be okay. Let's see. Actually, interesting. Nah, we'll think about that for another turn. We will tap our Arbor Elf, and that will put another quest counter on Quest for Renewal, and we will untap this forest, which we will then use to tap 2 and play Mirror of the Forebearers, which is a 2-cost artifact with, when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. We're going to choose Elves. And then it has pay 1 until end of turn. Mirror of the Forebearers becomes a copy of target creature you control of the chosen type, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So this means that we can double up on our creatures, and it means that most likely we will use this card to double up on Ivy Lane Denizen, so that when we play an elf on another turn, or a green creature at all, let's say. So basically what we'll do is we will pay 1 to make Mirror of the Forebearers a copy of Ivy Lane Denizen. Then we will we'll probably pay 3 and cast our commander. And when it comes into play, we'll be able to get 2 triggers of Ivy Lane Denizen and make our commander 2 power stronger. Then we will tap another mana and play Essence Warden, and it'll trigger the Ivy Lane Denizen again, and our commander will get even more powerful. So that's what our idea for the next turn is going to be. And hopefully we don't just keep drawing more land. But for now, we will pass the turn. Actually, that being said, that's an interesting. Well, we could attack the soldier deck because they're open. Actually, let's go ahead and do that. We're just going to go ahead and do that because the reason that is because we're going to think about the later turns when maybe. We can't hold off on dealing damage too much longer. So we're going to go ahead and attack the soldier deck for 2 damage and put them down to 38, which leaves us without any creatures, but next turn we'll have a big bad meanie commander to help us out with that. So let's rotate over to the soldier deck. The soldiers are going to untap, upkeep, draw a card. Swords to Plowshares. So that is not that is not a mana. But at least it is a removal spell, so that if somebody tries to come at us, we will be able to stop them. So for now, actually, let's see. Let's go ahead and we will pay 3 mana to cast Gideon Blackblade, which is a commander. So the way that commanders work is that they're kind of like creatures, but they're also kind of like players. So they come into play with a number of loyalty counters equal to the number on the bottom of their card. So that's 4. So we will start with 4 counters on it. And then Planeswalkers can use one of their abilities once during your turn. And it's sort of, all it costs is whatever it says on the numbers on this side. So this Gideon has 2 different abilities. It has a +1 ability. So we would, if we wanted to activate it, we would add a loyalty counter. And then its second ability is -6, exile target non-land permanent. Oh, sorry. The first ability is up to 1 other target creature you control gains your choice of Vigilance, Lifelink, or Indestructible until end of turn. So we will use it to make another creature gain some abilities. But otherwise, so essentially, whenever somebody attacks us, they can choose to attack our Planeswalker instead of us, and we can choose to use our creatures to defend our Planeswalker. So, Planeswalkers can have somewhere between like 1 and 4 abilities, I think. And we can't use this -6 ability until we have 6 counters on it. So we will go ahead and plus a counter here, and we will give Preeminent Captain Vigilance. So we don't need to give it Indestructible because there's not too many things out there that can take down Preeminent Captain right now, or can even block Preeminent Captain. So we'll give it Vigilance instead. And we will use Preeminent Captain to attack the Elf deck again, and our Field Marshal will attack the Sphinx deck. So actually, do we want to do... Yeah, we want to do that. So I think when it comes to blocking, the Elf deck will have to take 3 damage. They'll be down to 34. They don't have any blockers. The Sphinx deck does have some blockers, but those blockers are like Pilgrim's Eye, can block Field Marshal, but the damage isn't really that high, so it's not really helping. It's not doing too much for that. And the other creature that we could block with, Warden of the Evos Isle, could kill our could kill the Field Marshal, but the Warden would also die, and we really want the Warden out. So the Sphinx deck is going to go ahead and take 2 damage. And that's how this Soldier deck is really... Until we get some of these bigger cards out, that's kind of how the Soldier deck is going to operate. It's going to deal small amounts of damage over a long period of time, until it can get a ton of creatures out and then deal a lot of damage at once. But that's how we're just going to have to deal with it that way for now. Okay, so let's go ahead and pass the turn over to the Sphinx deck. So now the Sphinx deck actually does have a good target to attack. It has the Gideon that it can take down to stop the Soldier deck from getting too much advantage. So we will untap for the turn. We will draw a card. It is Conundrum Sphinx, which is not too bad. Let's see. I'm thinking about how we want to play this. Oh, we attacked with Ivy Lane Denizen. I'm sorry. The quest for Renewal actually got another counter on it, so it's at 3 counters now. Okay, sorry. That was just a random thing that I remembered. Okay, so I think that it's now time. We will pay 5 mana here. Warden of Eos will count as our 6 mana to be able to cast Unesh, Cryosphinx Sovereign. So when it comes into play, we reveal the top 4 cards of our library, which will be Temporal Mastery, another Sphinx, and 2 land cards. So we will have the Elf deck choose which cards, how they want to separate this. And when it comes to these cards, I think that it makes the most sense to do it. Well, okay, so the problem here is that this Mystic Sanctuary actually makes it difficult to decide how to separate this, because most likely we want to separate it into 1 land on each side, and the Sphinx is here. I think. Well, actually, no, that's the best for us. That would be how I would probably separate it, so I for sure get one of the cards. So this is actually the best way to separate it. Because what this means is that they get 2 of the lands, but they won't get both of these cards. Because if we separated it like this, the Mystic Sanctuary actually, when it comes into play, it allows us to basically get a card back. So when these 2 cards are in combination, the Mystic Sanctuary and the Temporal Mastery, it's guaranteed that they will get... Essentially, if they take this hand, then they get the Temporal Mastery, but they can't get the Mystic Sanctuary. Like, sorry, I'm trying to explain, but I'm doing it poorly. Okay. So if we do it like this, then they get Sphinx of the Lost Truths, and they're going to be able to use the Mystic Sanctuary to get the Temporal Mastery. So we don't want that. If we do it like this, then they could choose this hand. So if they choose this hand, they get the Sphinx, which is great. But the thing is that if they choose this hand, they could play Temporal Mastery, then use Mystic Sanctuary to play Temporal Mastery a second time. Oh no, I guess that it exiles itself. I mean, it's kind of... exile itself. Let's see. I guess maybe... No, let me think. No, I guess this is the best hand, because they won't be able to play Temporal Mastery for a small amount of mana. Yeah, okay, so this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it like this, which means that as the Sphinx player, I'm going to choose getting rid of this hand, and I will take this hand and put it here. Because what I'll do then is I get to play... Let's see. I guess I have to discard a card for the turn. But before I do that, I'm going to swing for 3 damage that are all flying at the Gideon. So Gideon is at 5 loyalty counters. It's going to go down to 2 because I had 3 damage dealt to it. And then we are going to end our turn, and we will do that by discarding Temporal Mastery, and we will also discard... I think we'll go ahead and discard the Repulse. So we will do it like that, which means that next turn we will play the Mystic Sanctuary to put Temporal Mastery on top of our library. After we do the rest of the things that we have in our hand. So let us pass the turn. That's all we're going to do for this turn. And move on to the Elves. So the Elves have a bunch of mana. That's about it right now. Untap, draw a card. Oh man. I guess this doesn't change too much. Tricky. Growing Rites of Itlamok is a legendary enchantment for 3 mana, 2 colorless, 1 green. It has, when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your... let's see. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more creatures, transform Growing Rites of Itlamok. So actually, yeah, I think we go and play this next turn is what we do. So for this turn, is that how we want to do it? Because if we do 3 here, we have 3 here to cast the commander. I like what we were thinking about last turn, honestly. So we're going to pay a mana to make Mirror of the Forebears a copy of Ivy Lane Denizen. Then we are going to pay 3 mana here to cast our commander from our command zone. And when it comes into play, it gets 2 counters because there are 2 triggers for Ivy Lane Denizen. Then we will pay another mana to cast Essence Warden, which will put another 2 counters on Azuri Renegade Leader. So now, with Azuri Renegade Leader, we have a 6/6 creature. So we have 2 other creatures, or we have some creatures that we can attack with. So let's go ahead and let's see. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and double attack the Gideon. And the reason that we can do this is because once we do, so this now goes up to 5. And whatever creature the preeminent captain attacks, we will use Arbor Elf to activate Azuri to give that creature regenerate, so it won't die. Which means that for certain, the Gideon is going to die this turn. So the preeminent captain will block the Mirror of the Forebears version of Ivy Lane Denizen. We will tap Arbor Elf to untap a forest, which we will then tap to activate Azuri Renegade Leader and give Mirror of the Forebears a regenerate shell, essentially. So the regenerate will stop the mirror from dying, and then Ivy Lane Denizen will deal the 2 last damage needed to kill Gideon. So unfortunately, our poor Gideon is dead now. And then that means that now we can, at the beginning of the soldier's turn, we will untap all of our creatures. This card actually stays tapped because it's no longer a creature after the end of our turn. So at least we have that. So we're going to move over to the soldiers. The soldiers will untap, upkeep, draw a card. It is, again, not... It's not a creature that we can put into play with Preeminent Captain, and it's not a land. That is highly unfortunate. So we will put it into our hand. It's still a good card. Shielded by Faith is an enchantment, an enchant aura. Enchanted creature has indestructible, and then whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you may attach Shield of Faith to that creature, which we will probably do once Odric comes out. We will. So I think our turn here is to go ahead and enchant Preeminent Captain with the indestructibility. And then this time we just pass the turn because we don't have any good attacks. Like, we can attack, but Azuri is going to kill essentially whatever we attack with. Especially if we attack the Elves with Field Marshal. So Field Marshal will die. If we attack with Preeminent Captain, then nothing happens. They could still block Field Marshal, and Field Marshal will be dead. But then we turn around and look at Sphinxes, and essentially the same thing will turn out with Sphinxes because they have a 4/4 Sphinx. So that's all we're going to do for our turn. We're just going to pass. It's really unfortunate. Normally I'm not this caught up on lands, but I guess it's... I made the choice with the hand that I drew. So we're going to keep going over to the Sphinx deck. The Sphinx deck now gets to do whatever it wants. Untap, upkeep, draw a card. It is Witness of Tomorrows. So it has flying. It's a 5-cost Sphinx. That's a 3/4 and it has flying. Then pay 3 colorless, 1 blue to scry 1. So let's see what we can do. I think really what we want to do is to go ahead and... crazy enough, our 6-cost Sphinx here, Sphinx and Magosi, now only costs 3 blue. Because Unesh reduces its cost by 2, and then Warden of Eos Isle reduces its cost by 1 more. So Sphinx of Magosi just costs 3. When it comes into play, we get to reveal the top 4 cards of our library. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to have the soldier deck choose to split this into 2 piles. So, looking at these cards, we have another Sphinx, we have an island, we have a Transmogrifying Wand, which is an artifact that allows us to essentially destroy target creature. And then we have Beacon of Tomorrows, which is a sorcery that has target player takes an extra turn after this one, and then shuffle it into its owner's library. Oh boy, extra turns. Did anybody mention extra turns? Because I think I like extra turns. Let's see. So I think that the Sphinx here that I talked about is, let's see. It's an okay, like it's okay. It's a low cost Sphinx, but it's not really that good. So if I was the soldiers, I would actually do this. I would give them either these 3 cards or the extra turn card. And most likely what we would do is we would, because we actually have a decent amount of card draw, and these cards weren't necessarily doing us too much good. Like, it's sad to lose the Transmogrifying Wand because it's actually really cool, but getting extra turns is actually extremely valuable. So we're going to go ahead and take this card. We don't want to play too many Sphinxes too quickly. So what we're going to do is going to go ahead and play the Mystic Sanctuary, which has, what is it? It has, when it enters the battlefield, it enters tapped unless you control 3 other islands. So we do control 3 islands. And then if it enters the battlefield untapped, you may put an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. We are obviously going to put the gain an extra turn card on top. So after that, we get to do some attacking. So I think that the elf deck is the deck that's getting too far ahead. Oh wait, let's see. We did have a creature come into play, so the elf deck is actually going to gain a life from that, from their Essence Warden. But then we will attack them for 3 and bring them back down, so now they are at 32. And is that... I think that's all the attacking I want to do, because I want to leave up some blockers for the elf deck. So after that, we will pass the turn back to the elves, and the elves will have another chance to do whatever they want. Okay, so untap, upkeep, draw a card. It is another forest. Wow. Okay, so we are going to play that forest. Then we will pay 3 mana to cast our Growing Rites of Itlamok. When we do that, we look at the top 4 cards of our library. And there are no creature cards, so we don't get to do anything with this. And we unfortunately lose Gravity Well, which would have been great against the Sphinxes. Crap. So we would put them in any order. We don't really care about the order, so we're just going to put them on the bottom like that. Okay. Oh, yay. Okay. We didn't have any creatures come into play. We don't have the ability to activate Azuri's ability yet. So we could attack with Azuri. We could. But do we want to? That's the question. And I don't think that we necessarily want to. I think we're just going to hold off for one more turn to see what we can get. Because then we'll be able to untap. Well, basically we're ending our turn because this Growing Rites of Itlamok has, at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 more creatures, transform it. We do have 4 creatures. So we transform it into this Itlama Cradle of the Sun, which is a legendary land with add 1 green mana to your mana pool, or tap to add a green mana to your mana pool for each creature you control. Excuse me? Excuse me? I get to just tap for a bunch of mana out of nowhere? Yes, please. Thank you. That's what we're going to do. That's why we waited, because now we get to play around with a crap ton of mana using that one card. The soldier deck, on the other hand, is looking very, very scared right now. They're going to untap, draw a card. Oh my gosh, finally a freaking land. So we are going to pay 4 mana. We will get Azuri out, or Odric out, I mean. Not Azuri. When it comes into play, we enchant it with Shielded by Faith. Now, each combat, all 3 of our creatures will have freaking indestructible. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Odds are that we're not going... We have indestructibility now, but we don't really have much else. So we're just going to pass. We need to keep holding off. We're stalemated a little bit here on attacking, but that's okay. So we will get over to the Sphinxes, and unfortunately the Sphinxes are going to kind of go a bit bananas with this, because they are going to untap these cards, untap these. We will draw a card for the turn, and our first card that we draw is Temporal Mastery, so we will reveal it and cast it for its miracle cost. Actually, let's see, miracle, let's do the Mind Stone instead. So, Temporal Mastery has take an extra turn after this one, then exile it, but it has this miracle cost, which is how we're doing this. Normally it costs 7 to play, but because of its miracle cost, if it's the first card we drew in a turn, then we get to cast it for 2 mana instead of 7. So now we just get to have an extra turn out of nowhere. Let's see. So we have a lot of reduced mana here. Not as much as I'd like, but let's see. So if we do 1, 2 like this, we can play Witness of Tomorrows, which is a Sphinx that we talked about a little bit ago. It's a 5-cost, 3/4 flying Sphinx with an ability to scry 1. So scrying is just we get to look at the top card of our library and then choose to put it on the top or bottom. And we only had to pay 2 because we have 3 mana reduction. So it only costs 3. Or 2, I mean. We get 3 mana for free, essentially. When it comes into play, Unesh activates. We look at the top cards of our library. So it is 2 lands, Kefnet's Monument, and Gravitational Shift. We're going to have the soldiers choose which one, like how to separate this pile. The Gravitational Shift gives flying creatures +2/+0, and all creatures without flying -2/-0. We probably don't want them to be able to have this card. Let's see. Kefnet's Monument reduces the cost of blue creature spells we play. So these are definitely the good cards that we have, but they haven't played a land this turn, so they probably do want to play a land if they can. I think it just makes sense to go and separate this into these 2 piles like this. Because if we do it like this, they almost certainly would take the mana reduction and the Gravitational Shift. So we probably want to separate them so that they can only have one or the other. And most likely here, so if I was given this, I most likely would take the Gravitational Shift because we want to start dealing damage. So those 2 cards go into our graveyard and these into our hand. We will play the island. Then we will... Let's see. I think that is 7 mana. We technically need 1 more. So let's go ahead and pay 2 mana, we will play Conundrum Sphinx, which is a 4-cost 4/4 flying Sphinx with whenever it attacks, each player names a card, then each player reveals the top card of his or her library. If the card the player revealed is the card they named, then they put it into their hand. Otherwise, it goes onto the bottom of their library. So when Conundrum Sphinx comes into play, we do the same thing again. We do top 4 cards, reveal them. We're going to choose the Elves to pick which one now. And we're separating that. That's kind of how you would probably want to do it. You could make an argument that choosing soldiers again, because they're on the down and out, they may feel obliged to help you a little bit more because the elves are the main enemy right now, other than us, obviously. Okay, so we have 2 different Sphinxes, an island, and another card that reduces mana costs of stuff. So, let's see. I think it makes sense to go ahead and, well, okay. So this again, these are always going to be tricky to choose, and sometimes you're not going to make the right choice because we don't know what is in the Sphinx's hand. We can see what they have out. They could easily play both the Sphinxes pretty cheaply. They have the mana. They have mana reduction. They may not need more mana reduction, and we don't know if they need islands or not. But being able to just keep casting more and more Sphinxes is a really bad thing for us. So they can't play another Sphinx this turn. So I think we separate it here because this Sharding Sphinx has, whenever an artifact creature deals damage to an opponent, then you get to, well, an artifact creature you control. So if once it comes out for the Sphinxes, the Sphinx deck can essentially make more and more blue flyers, and knowing that they have an enchantment that increases flying creatures' power, we probably don't want them to get an increasing number of artifacts, like basically 3/1 flyers. So I think the mana reduction, it makes sense to put the mana reduction with that Sphinx and then put the other Sphinx with the land, because they probably want the land more than the artifact to reduce mana costs because they have so much already. So that's how I would separate it if I were the elf deck. And looking at this, the Sharding Sphinx is really good, but we really want to be able to cast our other take an extra turn card next turn. So we're going to go ahead and drop the Sharding Sphinx and the Cloud Key and take these 2 cards. Okay, so now we have a free turn. We have 1 free turn. We are going to go ahead and attack for the turn. We will swing all 4 of these at the elf deck because, like I said, the elf deck is kind of ahead of the game right now with how many elves they have and how much mana they're going to be able to use. So, and especially because they have no cards in hand, so we know that. So the Sphinxes are going to deal 10 damage here and 3 more here, so 13 damage total, bringing the elf deck... Oh wait, the elf deck gained 2 life from Essence Warden, and they gained 1 more life from Odric. I don't want to forget that completely. We may be a little bit behind on counting it, but I want to be sure that we don't completely forget. So 13 damage, they're at 35, so now they are at 22 life. That's how much life they're at. Okay, so now we get our second turn. We will untap here, upkeep, draw a card. It is... Oh, wait, sorry. We had to discard a card from our hand because we have too many cards in our hand. We are going to go ahead and get rid of Memory Lapse. So we will get rid of that. Now we have 7 cards in hand. We untap for the next turn. We draw a card. It is another Sphinx, a Arbiter of the Ideal, a 6-cost 4/5 flying with Inspired. So whenever it becomes untapped, we reveal the top card of our library, and if it's an artifact, creature, or land card, we can put it onto the battlefield for free. And those cards end up being artifacts in addition to their other types. So let's go ahead and play a land for the turn and see what we've got. Let's see. So we have, out of the power and toughness that we have, let's see, 10, 13, 20 damage total. So as much as so I thought about thinking about it, we could play this Beacon of Tomorrows, but the problem is that we won't kill the elf deck this turn, and we really can kill them because of our gravitational shift. So I think it actually does make sense to go ahead and play the gravitational shift. We will stop the elf deck from winning this turn. Or, I mean, we'll stop the elf deck this turn, which leaves it just the soldiers and the sphinxes. And because we have so much power in the air and the soldiers are so far behind, we'll probably go ahead and we'll essentially just win the game here on out. It will probably take a lot for the soldier deck to catch up with us because of how behind they are on mana and everything else. So gravitational shift, creatures with flying get +2/+0, creatures without flying get -2/-0. So we will attack. Let's see, how much do we need to actually defeat the elf deck? So this right here is 14. See, 7 here. That's actually enough, but let's see if we can do it a different way. So let's see, 14. Sorry, I'm trying to think. 14 there. This is 17. And then that's 21. So instead of that, let's do this, making it 22, because that's this is 5 damage right there. So yeah, that should be enough, which means the other 2 creatures will go after the soldiers, dealing the soldiers a total of 10 damage and defeating let's see, yeah, so 4 2 plus 4 10. So that means that the soldier deck will be down to 28 life. Soldier deck not looking too good, and the elves just passed away, sadly. We can still play cards from our hand. We still have a cost reduction of a lot of 3. But that being said, we also don't necessarily want to overload the battlefield when we don't have to. Because the soldier deck could have a destroy all creatures effect, and that would set us behind if we played too many of our cards, and we can just keep playing Sphinxes the next turn. So we'll just hold off and pass on to not the elves. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clean up this elf deck and shuffle the soldiers over to its place so that we can reduce the amount of table spinning that we have. Poor elves getting dead as usual. They'll get their day in the sun someday. I mean, look, the good thing is that the elf deck did get to play cards. They did get to do things. Now, they may not have been able to do as much as they might have wanted to, but they did get to do a little bit. So that's my goal, is I want to be able to see that they managed to get to have at least one turn. Like they got to play a few cards. Because if they don't get to play anything, if there's like the soldier deck, I'm a little bit more annoyed with because they haven't gotten to do too much of anything. Now, that being said, they do have a really good setup, and if they had like just one more turn or something like that, it might be okay. But unfortunately, they don't really. We're just way too far behind. If we were at 5 mana and we drew a 6th land this turn, then it would be okay. So let's untap, draw a card, and it is a plains. We will play it. But like I said, we're just a little bit too far behind. Because we do have 2 cards that could wipe the field. Their field, essentially. But they have enough damage to kill us, and we don't have anything else that we can really do. Let's see. I think that because we really need one more mana, what we're going to do this turn is we're going to pay a white and exile one of their biggest creatures. So we will exile the Sphinx and Magosi, they will gain 6 life from that. So they will be at 42 life. And then we will declare attackers. So all of our creatures gain indestructible and first strike. So we will swing like that. See, we would leave them up as blockers, but we don't have any flying or anything with reach. So we just have to attack. So when we attack, we will deal 4, 7, 9 damage, putting them down to 33 life. Now the Sphinx deck will go. And like I said, it's kind of game over. We have untap, 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 upkeep, draw a card, an island. So we're going to go and play that island. And then we essentially tap out, right, to be able to play Beacon of Tomorrows, which gains us an extra turn. So it doesn't really matter what happens because now with our 2 turns, we swing here. We're going to deal, this turn, we're going to deal, see, 4, 5, 8, 12, 14, and then 24 damage this turn. We untap, draw a card, and a big, sorry, I'm laughing because it's Goliath Sphinx, a really, really big Sphinx. So we untap and deal another 24 damage, and we win the game. So that kind of shows you how how easy it can be for the big decks to take over the game if it goes on long enough. The small decks really need to do a lot of stuff really early, and that was, like, because this deck was not getting the cards it needed to cast the spells it had in hand, then it meant that the Sphinx deck was able to take over. So hopefully next week I think we'll play the Soldier deck again and give it a second chance to kind of shine and see if it can actually get the cards that it needs to be in the game, because that was a little too slow for my taste on one of the small decks. But for now, thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed these kind of beginner matches to kind of get a handle on making decisions and such. The Sphinx deck is really good for that. The Sphinx deck provides a lot of choice to the table to give them an influence in the things that are happening to them, especially in this case. If you learned anything, then it's that if you gain extra turns, you're probably going to win. If you gain enough of them, you're definitely going to win. So thank you all for watching. I'm going to go ahead and close it up for the day. And you can find me on I post all of this stuff, all of these VODs onto a YouTube channel. So you can, if you have a comment or something you want to ask, you can go ahead and find me there, or join me for the Wednesday, Thursday game, or join me next week. So thank you all. Have a great weekend.